Good morning, good afternoon from Barcelona, and welcome to a new Rhino webinar. This is Pedro here, and today we'll explore Nodepen, an innovative and continually evolving platform that brings Grasshopper to the web. This webinar will be more a technical exploration of the history of the project, detailing the goals, challenges, and successes. We will end with a demo of where things stand today and some of the latest thoughts on where things are going. Driesler has worked on a number of technical teams within the AEC community, including HOK buildingSMART, WeWork, Pollination Tools, and Hypar. He recently moved to London and is currently a software engineering at Speckle. So, well, Chuck, please feel free to start whenever you are ready, and I'll be collecting the questions for the Q&A session afterwards.
Fantastic. Thank you. And thank you for the introduction. You nailed it. And today I'll be talking about Nodepen, something I've talked about for quite a while, something that I will be talking about for quite a while. But just to add to the introduction, I'm currently a software engineer at Speckle. I recently relocated to London. And I kind of like to imagine clipping that little bit I just said and sending it to me maybe like just a few years ago without any explanation. Just kind of watching the gears spin, watching him squirm a little. It's really cool. But as a Speckle employee, I would be remiss to not plug we are having a hackathon starting tomorrow, this weekend, about all things Speckle. We're looking forward to some really interesting projects and some really interesting discussion, I think, just based on the judging panel about like all things you can do with Speckle and beyond, right? So starting tomorrow, you can look this up anywhere that you can see social media. But today I'm talking about Nodepen proper, and I think I'm invited to the Rhino user webinar because this project leans heavily on Rhino Compute. This project leans heavily and is only possible because a few years back, or I guess several years back at this point, they came out with Rhino Compute, right? And that on its own introduced the ability, just by allowing Rhino itself to live as a service, be accessed as a service, opened up a number of possibilities. And one of those that I kind of seized on is the ability to do Grasshopper from the web, right? So Nodepen in a sentence, what it should be, what it will be, what it is the ability to do Grasshopper from the web. Walk up to your computer, open your browser, and do Grasshopper. But if your first kind of reaction to that as a one-liner is something along the lines of, but Chuck, I already have Grasshopper on my computer. Why would I go to the browser? You're not wrong, and you're actually incredibly up to speed. A recurring theme as I continue to talk about this project is why does it exist, right? Why am I doing this? What is this all about? And every now and then I get asked like this to talk about where it is and where it's going, and I take it as an opportunity to do a little bit of, I would say, like public introspection along those questions. And in the lead up to this one in particular, what was on my mind is what does a project like this, what does Web Grasshopper do, or where does it belong in a world where something like Grasshopper 2 exists, which is doing Grasshopper on your computer, but better or newer, and where Grasshopper itself, like Grasshopper 1, right, is still being supported and used so widespread. And on the other end, on the web side, where does it live in a world where something like ShapeDiver exists and a number of other really great configurators, right? Where if it's meant to be a product, if it's meant to be a thing that fills either of those shoes, what it's currently doing is neither, and both of them worse, right? And just to skip ahead to where I kind of landed with that, right, where do I live in that world? Right now, my thinking is along the lines of why do I care about the answer to that question, right? The driving force behind this project has never been to win in that kind of sense, to be better than something that like full teams of incredibly talented people are working on and supporting and doing great work in. It's just what I said a second ago, and it's kind of what I need to remind myself, I think, at this point in time in the process. Nodepen exists because it became possible. And as more time gets invested into it, as Nodepen moves along, I think it opens up more possibilities for other kind of things to happen. So just the simple release of something like Rhino Compute the ability to literally do Grasshopper on the browser, I think is enough of a reason to continue pursuing this kind of project. I was speaking to one of my coworkers, one of my new coworkers yesterday, Jonathan, about this, and he kind of dropped a nice little one-liner. He characterized it as a sort of perpetual hackathon, right? That this is a bucket of interesting problems that I think are worth solving, and some that are not, some that go nowhere, right? But the end result of this, right, public therapy kind of session is that I don't have to answer those questions. We can just continue working on it, continue letting things come out to the open, and continue participating in this perpetual hackathon. And if you're into hackathons, this weekend, Speckle is hosting a hackathon called Beyond the Speckleverse, where we'll be expecting a lot of really interesting projects and discussion around what Speckle can do. Please check it out. But today I'll be talking about a few different aspects of the project. The place I'd like to start is along the history. Right, this project was initiated and actually began in 2019 at this point. Almost 5 years of iteration, almost 5 years of what this could be and what this couldn't be. I'm going to give a brief overview of like the different kind of touch points or milestones over that period of time, because I think they've reached different conclusions and have informed well why things look the way they do today. And then in the next bit, given the crowd today, I think it'd be nice to take, for the first time, the opportunity to publicly look at the code, talk through how things work, why things work, in a little bit more concrete detail. The project is open source, right? The code has always been available, but the code is also something that, like a hackathon, right, over these years has grown and developed with me. It's not always the best, not always the most accessible, not always good, right? But if I get to choose what to show you today, I think there's a few important files and things that we could enjoy looking at together. And at the end, there'll be a demo of where things stand today, a little bit of talking about where things could go next and what kind of problems I'm facing, and kind of end it answering the question of why it's not online, right? As much as this project is a thing that has existed like in a repo and somewhere that you can spin up on your own, it's genuinely not going to have any legs to stand on unless it's actually a website you can just visit, right? If you literally had to set up this instead of just going to Grasshopper on your machine, there's nowhere for this to go. And I think that's the next problem I'd like to solve, and I'd like to end talking about why that's not happening just quite yet. But the earliest version of Nodepen was, I'd say, released or like put out into the world in the very beginning of 2020. I had just graduated in 2019 from Pratt Institute with a bachelor's in architecture. But like a lot of people, I would say, like in that world or in architectural education, I was introduced to Grasshopper as part of our curriculum. And I was one of those people that when you were introduced to Grasshopper, kind of immediately seized on it. And I realized and I felt right away like whatever this is, whatever these nodes and wires are, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to continue doing. This feels right. Sections are cool, but this feels correct. And so it kind of took over my mind, took over my brain. I started taking internships in like BIM type organizations and situations, and just finding any excuse I could to continue working with Grasshopper and deepening my understanding of it. But by the time I graduated in 2019, just a bachelor's in architecture and an obsession with Grasshopper wasn't enough to properly jump into software as a profession, which is somewhere I knew I wanted to head, but somewhere that I couldn't do just with what I had at the time. And so I don't know if this has ever been your experience, but like the second I started Googling, right, how to become a software engineer, how to like do web development, all of my ads, all of my feeds, all of my services were replaced with just an onslaught of like, learn this language, read this blog, buy this book, do this kind of like to-do list project. And so there was this overwhelming sense of like, if I wanted to do this, I had to make something. But I was kind of unsatisfied with the options that were being most immediately presented to me. I didn't want to make a dozen to-do apps. I didn't want to do a bunch of short projects over the weekend that maybe would go nowhere, as much as it did seem important to make. I wanted one thing that I could invest a lot of time in, one thing that I could learn a lot from, and something that combined things I knew about already with things that I wanted to know. And so that was Grasshopper, naturally, merging with web development, which is where I wanted to end up. And then from there, kind of asked myself, what is that project? Well, it's Grasshopper on the web. I had just seen Rhino Compute demonstrated at the AEC Tech Hackathon. I saw that like the bits and pieces were there. But what came out of that first iteration is this, is what you're seeing here. Someone with very visible opinions about graphics, visible not great opinions. And it doesn't run great. It doesn't do much more, but it's genuinely making a Grasshopper script. It's genuinely saying this parameter. And there's one line in the code in Rhino Compute that knows to check that specific parameter and that specific value to generate a model, right? So it couldn't do anything more than that. But just through the process there, I was reassured that something like this was possible and was a project that I could continue. So in this mode of like, it's educational, something I want to learn about, something I want to learn from. The next iteration of Grasshopper was this like Nodepen project without a name. We're not going to talk about the name. But the next iteration of this project was kind of like a wide shotgun burst of like, here's this thing you can do in Grasshopper. How do I make it so that I can actually do it from the browser? So it was just this weird collection of features that were not important and features that were kind of important, like connecting wires and whatever this is. Just learning from the exercise of making these kind of things possible or done. What made this phase especially dangerous is around this time I was also being a lot better about putting every little minor update into Twitter, out into the world, right? Here, I made this kind of thing. What do you guys think about it? And Twitter was really good at seeing something like that and saying, well, what if Nodepen could do X? What if it could do Y? What if I could do Grasshopper from my phone? Or what if I could do taxes on Grasshopper or whatever, like just any kind of request. And I was in this headspace of just saying yes, yes, yes. And so I learned a lot about what could be done. But this went about as far until I got to something like, if I want to do this, I need to be able to undo. I need to be able to copy paste, right? The not sexy, but very required parts of like finishing a piece of software and making it useful. After just doing the fun bits, it got to the actual homework of the job. And that's when this thing started to lose steam. Because the code base at this point was a disaster, I have to say, because it was just shooting off in random tangents and branches just to make certain things possible. And again, we learned a lot about what could be done and how much of Grasshopper on the web could be possible. But there was no way this was ever going to be something real. And so that's kind of where I parked it. And I started over fresh again on the next revision of it. Somewhat from zero, somewhat not from zero, but definitely informed by the fact that like, one, I want this one to be the most real version. Right, the thing that like looks and feels like a product at the time I was calling it. And also there's a mountain of boring tasks between me and there that also needs to be accomplished. So this version of the code base, this is what you could, if you were to go to the repo today, the 1.0 release, leaned a lot more heavily on existing libraries and kind of tried to focus on the task at hand without understanding exactly, I think, the scale of how much needs to happen, even outside of leaning on libraries, to make something like Grasshopper online. If you had played with this at the time, this is around January of 2022, it had the semi-professional veneer of like you could sign up, you could create your scripts, you could upload and share them. But if you went to actually do anything, it supported like 30 components or 40 components, right? You could make a line and a point. Because me still thinking we could do this kind of custom, underestimated all of 3D graphics or something, right? And it wasn't coming from a position of hubris as much as like I'm in no hurry kind of situation. But this did start to really consume my life, and a few things happened at once that kind of ended this version of the project. So, right, this is around January 2022. I just released this. I had been like missing out on things on the weekend. I had been like doing my full-time job in software, going home and working more on this. So just a lot staring at the computer. And so I had finally caught up with a friend that I hadn't seen in quite a while to talk about this project. And I was like getting all frustrated. I was like, this is all happening. This is cool. I put all this time into here, but like, where are the users? Why don't I have users when I don't even know what the product is? How am I going to get people to pay for this to keep it online? And he wasn't really listening. He was kind of zoned out, just kind of watching me. I think he was like slightly frowning. And it was very much a like hand on the shoulder moment, looking me in the eyes, like, you need to take a break. You need to not, you need to do anything about this. Right. It was a lot at once that I was expecting of myself. I think it was a really cool point to reach here. But it was expensive, it wasn't being used enough, and if it was meant to make money to support itself, I'm not sure there's a universe where that actually happens. And I like keep my sanity. So the project's paused there with all the learnings that I had and the abilities that it could do. And just kind of sat for a bit. And I had to recollect myself. I did want this thing to be real. I wanted it to happen. But I had a better sense of just like how much of the problem is something that I could meaningfully contribute to, how much of the problem is something that I want to do, and how much needs to be leaning on things that are already out in the world. Right. It's still amazing, and the project still really does lean on Rhino Compute and the ability to just genuinely run Grasshopper to do like the most important part of the work. But everything else, I needed a bit of support. I needed a bit of someone's shoulders to lean on and cry on. And that's where this latest version, I would say the current version of it, and what will be the version for a long time, I think, just given how it's been going, landed. It was Speckle, right? I kind of enumerated the problems that I had to do, the problems that I kind of already solved, and things I had no interest or ability to do, like 3D graphics, where to store all my 3D data, how to actually view and like shuttle it between places, right? And I just found myself describing Speckle. And I looked into what it could do, what was actually available as a developer, what could I pick up and work with, and was very pleased. Right. Speckle is the longest living revision. The Speckleified Nodepen is the longest living revision of the project, I think, because of one, how natural of a marriage it is, and two, how much of the important hard work I'm able to lean on what was that team and is now my team, which is really cool to say for the first time. Yeah, like take something I love, make it more real, but focus on the bits that I can actually innovate on. And yeah, now I have more secret powers if Speckle ever needs to do something else. But that's the what has happened, why it has happened, and where we're going with Speckle and Nodepen. If you were to visit the repo today and work on and manage to get it running and set up for yourself, it offers a Grasshopper experience, the full suite of all of the Grasshopper components themselves, but with a bunch of small paper cuts and large paper cuts and things that, like, if I ever really wanted to reach parity with Grasshopper proper, which I don't think is the job anymore, or the task anymore, or ever could be, there's one set of things to do. If I want to make it a configurator, there's one set of things to do. But like I said in the beginning, it's not so much that the project is missing what is this product and what is it meant to be, and a strong definition there. As much as I think I need to return to the root kind of thrust at the beginning of the project, which was these things are possible now, we should continue exploring them. And what makes the marriage of Speckle so good, especially given my work there now, is that's where all of the important and interesting innovations are to me these days. If I were to spend the next 2 years recreating Grasshopper on the web, that's cool. If I were to integrate now with Speckle Automate and the kind of potential that offers on a rolling body of Grasshopper definitions and things being shared, right? If I were to leverage the new opportunities of what a Speckle project sending data to another Speckle project might be able to do, right? Like if I were to consider innovation as sort of a multiplier of what could be possible, then I can like stop saying, well, how do I recreate Grasshopper? How do I recreate ShapeDiver? And hopefully end up in a place where, like, okay, this is something we could only do now. And I'm excited about what that could be. I'm trying to temper myself a little bit because I don't want to do the WeWork, like, and then we'll save the world with Grasshopper on the web, right? I don't actually know. I'm trying to make it sound exciting because I'm excited about it. But it could very much go nowhere. But I don't think so. I think it's going to at least be something. That said, enough a little bit of soapboxing. I would like to talk a little bit more concretely about Speckle as an onboarding into looking at the code directly and seeing what's actually happening. I just did a quick little hand waving around, like Speckle solving my problems. I'd like to talk a little bit more about what that was. So this is sorry, I just realized this is like the same graphics as that the first Grasshopper version that I was just talking a second ago. I haven't changed at all. This is a diagram of what Nodepen more or less has to do. There's a front-end client that is generating the graphs described in JSON. It has to send them down to the server to create a Grasshopper script, actually execute it, do the Rhino Compute bit. That is like the whole reason this project can even exist. And once we actually have a solution, once we actually have a script and the results inside of it, we need to park it somewhere, and then we need a way to look at it. And when we look at it, that's both like 3D geometry, like actually the fun part, I think, for me has always been that like you get something in 3D, something real. We're not doing necessarily just tabular data. But we do need to look at tabular data sometimes, right? We do need to inspect what's the result on this specific parameter, what's the data structure of this like list or list of lists, or what's going on there. Right? So both of those things are still required to be productive on Grasshopper. In the earlier versions of Nodepen, this was like the I have to do everything, and I'm not ever going to be able to do that situation. Where at the very least, this important corner was covered by Rhino Compute. But everything else, for all the reasons I just described, insurmountable. For me, definitely. And what Speckle managed to do is cut the required job in half. And of the rest of those, Rhino Compute was handling the rest, right? And allow me to focus on very much just like front-end concern. What does this thing look like? How do I interact with whatever this API is? And then very loosely wrap Rhino Compute, and then lean on Speckle as a place to send the data, lean on Speckle as a place to ask for it to view the data, both in 3D and tabular ways, right? So I didn't have to invent all the infrastructure around what this thing could do. I could just reuse and lean on things that were already there. And it's been a really comfortable process since because of that. Yeah, Speckle is cool. That was the point of what's going on there. I'm going to pivot now into talking about some specific files in the code, but what they offer between the TypeScript amounts of code for the backend and the front-end interactions, and the C# side of things, how I actually engage with Rhino Compute, how we touch Rhino Compute, create our Grasshopper script, make it happen, and then how that ends up being bridged over to Speckle. So I hope this transition goes well. We rehearsed this a little bit. Is there any way for me to get a thumbs up that you can see code? The answer is no. So I'm just going to continue as if you can. Thank you for that. So, okay. So what we're looking at now is the repository for Nodepen. If you were to go to GitHub Nodepen nodes, this is code you can go and just swim in. But I've picked out a few key files to help talk about more specifically what's being done in code, and like kind of help develop a map if you're ever interested in, like, say there was a hackathon this weekend and wanted to hack with Nodepen and Speckle, if you wanted to. There's 2 or 3 important, you could say, like, way markers. But I'd like to start in the packages part of the repository. These are the kind of like modularized lessons from the last few iterations of Nodepen. If you ever did look at the code, you still can. It's all sitting around in the repo history if you really wanted to. There was no actual structure, no real strategy around where code goes, how it's meant to be used. This was like an all-encompassing project that just had to do what it needed to do. But this latest revision was taking the attitude that, like, I could pretend that this is like a library that could be consumed in other places or used in other ways, as a strategy for at least giving me some structure, some clear boundaries to try to develop the thing as, but also keep it a little bit more useful as an open source kind of project. In theory, you could pick up Nodepen, the viewer, and build something else on top of it. I'm not sure that anyone should be subjected to that kind of torture at this point in time, but it's a structure, and it's the kind of way I can actually talk about the modules and the bits that are happening in this project itself. So if you were to visit the repo and look at packages themselves, 3 main repositories, or the 3 main modules, as far as I understand them, are the converters, which are the things that are actually written in C# and doing the back and forth. This is technically a Speckle kit, but Speckle kits are no longer. Important enough to remember that this is the bit that converts Nodepen data between Rhino and Grasshopper data into something that will eventually live on a Speckle server. Core contains, I'd say, a baseline set of like type definitions and the main concepts in Nodepen land. Right. Earlier presentations, I think I would have said something along the lines of Nodepen today is for like node-based visual programming. It's not just Grasshopper. It's not just one thing or another, and it is written and phrased in that way, but it will just be Grasshopper for a long time. So it's kind of moot. But core is how I define the Nodepen, the nodes and the ports, and how those all come together. And the deeper you go into something like a document node, you'll start finding references to things that very much are just Grasshopper, right? A node, the actual block itself, as you see, the building block of your script, is a almost one-to-one metaphor for a Grasshopper component. Right, so you have all the things you'd expect to require to know if you wanted to draw something, the dimensions of the thing, the position, and then there's some way to describe how this thing connects to all the other things and what does it have. And if you just jump a little bit further down the types, you'll see that the data tree itself is quite literally a structure of a data tree in Grasshopper. So when it does come time to do something other than Grasshopper on Nodepen, we'll see how that goes. But if you were to look through all the different types here, I think it's enough to understand that just that one bit I said, that a node is a component. This is the bit that's going to be interacting with other things. There'll be maybe some flags or some like light hints and suggestions as to when a node is actually a floating parameter or a panel or something a little bit more special. But everything kind of extends from this basic concept, because these are the things I'm going to want to know in almost all cases. This is used by then that last package, the nodes library. This is where most of the work, the visual work, the juice like actually lives. It's what defines what is a node. It's what defines how they all interact. It's all the React nonsense around how this hook talks to this hook, how this state talks to that state. And it contains just some basic files around what it means to be a node, right? That's both the visuals here and the way the behaviors interact with each other. So when it comes time to draw a node on Nodepen, we're rendering this generic node component. It has the ability to be selected. It has the ability to be dragged. And based on the state of that node, right, the document node that we were just describing, we draw it. If you were to jump into any of this here, the current version of Nodepen is an SVG drawing, not a canvas, not a select collection of divs as earlier versions might have been. I've reached for SVG because I wish I could tell you in like proper terms. I just think it's pretty. I think it's better than the divs themselves. I think I don't like the visuals of the graphic of the canvas. SVG is sharp, nice and sharp. So this is working in SVG. We have a nice drawing every time we make changes, and React offers up the ability to, instead of like in the first versions of Nodepen where I was redrawing an entire thing anytime anything happened, React has abstracted away anything. If I just need to change the position of one node, that's what React is designed to do. The state changes, the SVG changes, and just that part of the document changes to reflect it. So I think those are the two places I would start if I was trying to talk about what I needed to do or interact with if I wanted to touch Nodepen and code. The other really important bucket is the converters that I mentioned earlier. Nodepen publishes a Nodepen convert class, kind of inspired by, stolen from like JSON convert syntax. This is where it provides the ability to serialize a Nodepen document, or that's the JSON structure that we were describing, directly into a GH archive. If you've done any amount of development with the Rhino SDK, or like developing a plugin for Grasshopper, these are the same types that are exposed in that context. Right, this is the same C# libraries that you would have been interacting with, and this library's job is to take that JSON structure and instantiate things that Grasshopper, the SDK, knows how to work with and execute. So if you want to flip through there, this is where it would go to talk about what that looks like in both worlds. Lots of hand waving between like I had this in JSON on a browser, and somehow also it gets shuttled down into a Grasshopper document that we can solve. I think this continues to be the main problem of why Nodepen is expensive and an unassumingly difficult part of the task every time is deployment, right? Making this real, making this something that yes, it's cute. I can run it on my computer and we can like directly talk to each other, and I'm only ever going to do one request at a time, so that's fine. But having a good strategy for how this thing deploys and how this thing interacts with an unknown number of people is where a lot of the time has been invested lately, as opposed to like adding another feature for Grasshopper to the core library. That said, I'm not going to talk about that right now, but I will be skipping over. I don't have a good answer. But we will eventually, in the process of solving a Grasshopper script, we jump from the serialization of JSON to Grasshopper archive to more or less, I had it flagged. Yeah, just one line, right? Grasshopper itself, and this is like, again, why the project is even possible, what Rhino Compute offers us to do, is very simple. Just solve my document, right? I don't know enough about the Grasshopper internals to know if this is actually literally how things happen. But this line here is why I continue to work on this project. Because if I was asked to do Grasshopper 2 and make it again, that's just not gonna happen. I'm a fan. I'm not Grasshopper. But what happens when you solve the Grasshopper document, when you request for the thing to solve, is we just immediately solve the entire document after creating it every time, right? And then we crawl down all of the results. We look for all the different document objects. We look for the different types of components in C# kind of code the way Grasshopper describes itself in code, and just start ripping the data out. The data gets pulled out into its own JSON serializable situation, and then we enter Speckle land. Another cute, nice one-liner that helps the project feel believable is we take like the thing, all the results, and then we just send it to Speckle. Right, this little guy here is all Speckle needs to know, or I need to do, to take all my visible now, right, 3D geometry that's actually going to be inspectable, send it down to my stream as any amount of different ways I want to represent it, so that it's living in a place where I can do the test that we was described in the diagram, right? I can ask to view the result, and I can ask to view things about the result, like what is the data structure, how does this thing relate to that thing, because all of that lives in the Speckle the project as my 3D data. Right, so this file is also a really important one if I were to look at like the load-bearing paths on Nodepen. The Rhino Compute line to solve the project, and the Speckle line to store the data somewhere. I think one note I wanted to make about this file is that when I started doing things about this way, I would have assumed that creating a Grasshopper script, literally recreating it on every request and solving the entire thing on every request was kind of like a bad idea. It's like not the way that you would want to like most efficiently get through the problem. But shockingly, it continues to be so far away from the main bottlenecks. If you're ever invested in this problem, there's some magic that I've been meaning to ask one of these McNeil people the next time I see them, where if I were to like, no matter how big the script is, this massive unwieldy Grasshopper definition, if I were to send it down, the first time it runs, it's probably going to be crunchy. It's going to have to do all the different work. It's going to have to solve all the different nodes for the first time. But in a totally separate request, so long as Rhino is kept running, if I were to send that same script down, or say, you know, a minor change, because that's the way that Nodepen works, is it sends a new solution every time any part of the graph changes on the front end. The next solution is like that. Right, so there's an upfront cost, but so long as Grasshopper still has access to some version of that script that I don't fully understand the rules just yet, this appears to be a totally fine way to go about it. Right, so that's the kind of there's all kinds of little like neat things like that I'm sure actually if you guys are like doing development of your own, you've stumbled upon or discovered, you know, in the mind of David Rutten in some way or the other. But just to keep a common theme and a thread for the presentation, more of this is what I want the project to be about for me moving forward, right? Is that the discovery that comes with trying to do things that are only possible now, and learning about something like Grasshopper that I love quite a bit. Just that's me sharing with you all. Just something I found quite neat. But that's enough code. I think like this is my first time talking through code. It's actually been very difficult to talk about code to a bunch of empty boxes. There's no, is this working for you or not situation. So that's about as far as I wanted to go with that. If you ever want to talk about Nodepen more and code or whatnot, or if you have questions about the code, this is a massive part of my life. I'm happy to do this kind of talking almost all the time. Even better if you're in London and want to meet in person. But I want to jump to the fun part, the live demo. Show you kind of where things are now, and cross my fingers that everything goes just good enough. It's an obligatory refresh. That's nothing. So this is what you're presented with these days. If Grasshopper or if Nodepen were to be online, right? If you were to just be like going to the website to do work, right? So if this was a product, not great. What am I looking at? What am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to go in it? I'm kind of leaning right now on the fact that you have some muscle memory if you want to do Grasshopper. And one of those things is that like double click, right? If I want to add a component, I double click and I'm presented with a list of things I want to make. And I'm very used to at this point, right? Like a few aliases or a few known components that I like to work with. So you do that, you create a component, and all the code that we just talked about, all those paths are checking in the background. It created a JSON representation or something like this of what I just made, sent it down to the backend. We created a Grasshopper script, we solved it, we stored the data in Speckle, and now we're asking for it to look at it. Maybe a lot of steps for something as simple as this, right? But what continues to be cool about this project to me is that that was literally Grasshopper that ran and generated the results. We didn't rewrite what it means to be a point. We're not pretending to like gesture at Grasshopper. It's like it literally ran that component. This is where Grasshopper 2 gets actually kind of difficult for the project, is because they're not the same anymore. They're actually entirely different environments. So it's we'll see what I do about that. I'm just not too sure. But we made a point. You can see him there. He's very adorable, right there in the center. Actually, depending on your resolution, you may not see him at all. So we'll try to make something a little bit more interesting. Maybe a circle. Right. So a lot of the same affordances you've seen before. A little bit of a like, hey, this didn't do what it was supposed to. Input parameter blank failed to do whatever. It's asking for a center. Right? I can hover over. I can see it. You can't see what the type is yet, because I have no idea how I want to represent those. But that's not too important right now. But I pass the point to the center. If you've ever done Grasshopper before, there you go. Right, this is what it creates. It's a circle. You can then start to do things with the circle. Like maybe I want to divide the circle into points for some reason. I can connect it. I can jump over. There you go. And the extent of the like configurator like experience that's been implemented at this point is that you can also go over to any of these inputs and pin it to this kind of floating HUD. If you wanted to maybe like be watching your results as you get them. This has always been one thing that is it's hard for me to say if it's my favorite part of Grasshopper proper, but it definitely is like one of the coolest parts. Is that I think it's definitely what like made such a lasting impression on me so early on. Is that when you're working with the script in Grasshopper on your machine, you're seeing the results live. You move the number slider, the thing explodes or dances or moves around or like panelizes, right? The very quick feedback. And in moving to the web, I've shot myself in the foot if that's what I want to accomplish. Right, any amount of latency just ruins the illusion of that being true. Right, and there's an amount of latency here that's unavoidable. That said, the affordance I have for that is at the very least I'd like to be interacting with the script, but also still looking at my results live. And so the pinning input is supposed to start to bring some of that back. So if I pinned in the count and I changed it to 100, right, it's going to start crunching. It's not instantly happening, but it does come back to me, right? And so I could start pinning any number of inputs I care about and making something real. And then if like something went wrong or I'm not quite happy with the result, I still have the ability to jump back to this like script view that we all know. And there's still affordances for looking at and inspecting data the way that I'm learning actually, the more I talk about this with people, the muscle memory and the habits that I personally have that are actually not quite universal. It's a lot of fun to talk about this project with someone that like hasn't seen it before, or someone that is in Grasshopper a lot but isn't quite into this. And I'll be like, yeah, and I did the thing where you can like hover and look at da 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 da. Like I never use that. That's not how I do Grasshopper. That's not what I would use. I need the ability to hold down Control and Alt and spread the script apart. And I'm not doing that anytime soon. Sorry, I tangented myself. I just wanted to demonstrate that we have just enough to see what the values are, what they might be, and how they connect. And so Speckle got rid of all the other parts of the problem so that I could focus on what's happening here. Right. And as I continue to work on the project, there's like a lot of low-hanging fruit. There's almost an infinite number of directions you could go. For example, if if you remember the way I described the way we solve the scripts, at some point in the process, there is quite literally a Grasshopper definition, right? So you would think that it would be easy enough to hold on to that and allow the ability to download literally a script. And on the flip side, if we're only working and solving Grasshopper scripts themselves, you should have the ability to upload a literal script and work with it there, right? But I'm in this weird gridlock of like, why is that more important than a panel, right? The ability or a floating parameter, or the ability to actually support plugins, right? So there's almost too much that could happen. But for the near future, I think the way I plan to go about this, lean on Speckle more, lean on the kind of more things that could only happen there. And as more opportunities are presented, we come back and continue to enhance just the base offering for like the homework part of like what it means to be able to do Grasshopper. Because it will never be Grasshopper, right? This reason alone is, I think, a reason to disqualify do literally Grasshopper, because you're never going to get, well, I shouldn't say never working in tech, but it's, I'd be surprised if we manage to find a way to make this as snappy and exciting as working in Grasshopper on your desktop. And even more so, why would you do that if you could just go do that now on Grasshopper? Why recreate that? We can be doing anything else. This is if you wanted to play with Nodepen, this would require visiting the repository. Now, there's a few instructions on there that are prone to have reasons they don't work on like your machine or your environment. But every now and then I get an email like, hey, I tried to do this. How do I fix it? I do answer those emails. But the short answer is I hope that we're online. Right. So that was the demo. There is a hackathon happening this weekend. Speckle is doing a hackathon around some interesting projects and automate and the kind of things that Speckle can offer these days. And at the same time, there will be a public test. Nodepen will be online because I'll be experimenting and tinkering as well live. I have an idea for, I think, an incredibly, definitely the cheapest so far implementation of what the infrastructure looks like and how it might run. It might not work, so we're calling it a test. But as we hack on Speckle, as we hack on Nodepen and Speckle, as we hack on whatever you're doing with Speckle, there'll also be a brief chance this weekend to pick this up, see where it goes, see how it breaks. As I get the heartbeat going again, of like at least having things happen, seeing what could be possible. And hopefully finding a way for this just to be online. And then I can stop ending every presentation every few months with like, hopefully soon. And we can talk about the kind of things that were accomplished. That's fun. This is where you can find me. This is where you can find the repository. And I hope to see you around the hackathon or around Nodepen or anywhere. I can talk about this forever at this point in my life. And I guess I'll end it in saying thank you to Pedro for inviting me to talk about it here. It's been a pleasure to look at it up close again, think about the things I thought about, and really reflect on like that first hackathon where the McNeil folks, you guys were like showing this thing. They're like, hey, we can actually do this now. And like, you know, it's been several years. There's other cool things happening because of it. So thanks. It's cool that it's possible.
Hey, thank you very much, Zach, for your amazing presentation, for this awesome project that you've been working around for some time. And I don't know if there are any questions from the audience now that we have Zach waiting for them. But in the meantime, well, as you mentioned, this project has come a long way. But what would you do differently if you were to start the project right now? I mean, with all the knowledge that you all have, I'm pretty sure that you would do things differently, for sure. But I don't know.
Absolutely. If I had to start fresh today, I mean, yeah, I'd slap them across the face, like no more rewriting, don't do that. But if I had to start fresh today, I think Speckle is still fundamentally required, right? Like this is an important part of the stack at this point. It's open source in the sense that I can morph and change it if I have to, but I don't have to. That hasn't really been required. It's a nice foundation for what you can do next to the data layer of like this project, right? But before I like wrote anything, I think I'd want to be a little more clear with myself around where are you going? What's trying to happen? I'm stuck in this loop now forever, right? Of like this is just a thing that's going to be developed and worked on and end up in different places. But I think it'd be worthwhile, and I think there will be some version of this between me and myself in the future of like, okay, but what are you actually going to do? What are we actually going to try to make happen? I also, I don't know, maybe I'd save up some money first. It's just expensive to run Windows. But those are the problems that I'd want to have a good answer to.
Okay. So Laura Fami wants to know how do inputs and outputs work? I think that part has lots of potential for the non-expert or Grasshopper users.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think in this presentation, I characterized it as a way to like give you that impression of working with the script, but also seeing the visuals at the same time. But the other part of what's cool about just doing inputs and outputs, like just that part of a configurator experience, is if and when Grasshopper has the ability to, or Nodepen has the ability to upload and share scripts with other people, you kind of hand this thing to someone who might not know anything about Grasshopper. You show them just the levers they can pull and the inputs and the outputs, and then they can start playing with it, right? It really is this nice like magnifying glass or simplification of how to work in a Grasshopper script. I don't know, like there's definitely been many, especially when I was working in architecture firms, there was a lot of times when I made this big thing that like did what it needed to do for the job, and then I had to like left justify and bring all the main inputs all the way to the left and like put them in colored boxes and whatnot, right? That ability to present an interface for people to actually work with the thing as a tool. I think inputs are really a nice way to do that. To actually answer your question, the way they work is a flag on the document itself that says, hey, this input on this, or this parameter on this node is important. Show it here instead of also over there. Right? It's just pointing. And if it's a number, it shows a number. If it's a string, it shows a string. And it behaves as if you had walked up to the node itself, right-clicked it and set a value.
And is it possible to have more than one Nodepen document? I mean, can you have two of them working at the same time?
That's really interesting. I haven't thought about it. I think the short answer is there's no reason there shouldn't be the ability to. And if they start like talking to each other or like both, definitely in Speckle, you could have two windows with a Grasshopper document, and then those are sending different models to one project. And then you have some really interesting possibilities around like, what do I show from each? How do I compare the information in both of these two things? I haven't thought about that, but instantly that sounds it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, because the next question would be if it can more than one person work on the same model with two different Grasshopper definitions, or Nodepen documents in this case.
Right. Yeah, I have a particular relationship with multiplayer. And I'd love to do that. I genuinely want to do that. But it's genuinely difficult.
Yeah.
But I think that like it's one of those, same as like the ability to share things easily. It's one of those like you're on the web, this is what you should be able to do kind of things. And I'd love to get to that point. I want that to happen.
Now you have the example of Crash, this plugin for
yes,
turning turning Rhino multiplayer or different users.
I was there. I wanted to be on that team so bad, but I missed my chance. No, that one was really cool, right? And it had to live in Rhino just because it was a hackathon. That's where they chose to do it. Right. But imagine if you had like the web at your disposal to also like have different affordances for what gets displayed where. Like everyone has a set of expectations when it comes to a website, and not everyone knows what to do when they're presented with Rhino for the first time, right? But Crash, very cool tech. Very cool tech.
And is it possible to build, I don't want to say plugins, but yeah, like add-ons on top of what a Nodepen is right now or in the future?
I think, yeah. The most immediate plugin experience that I can see happening is Rhino and McNeil. You folks offer a really nice, at this point, package manager for Rhino Yak, and it's runnable from CLI commands. It really plays nice with my side of things where I have to deploy a Rhino server somewhere with some configuration. I think like Grasshopper plugins themselves are things that could very easily be lifted and shown on Nodepen as it stands today. If you wanted to do something that changes the behavior of Nodepen, it has not been thought about at all, and I think would be equivalent to just submitting changes to the project itself. And honestly, actually, now that I say that, no one has ever asked for that. So it's kind of scaring me a little bit. I don't know what that would look like. But sure, I mean, anything is possible, right? That's what we're doing this time for this phase of the project.
Yeah, Alexia wants to know if it's possible to use also the plugins for Grasshopper, the current plugins for Grasshopper.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That would be quite easy to support. I think I would have to try it and make sure what I said wasn't a lie. But a plugin component in the Nodepen universe looks no different than a native component. As long as it's not doing anything too fancy. That's probably where things would fall.
Okay, I guess that you should install those plugins in the Rhino Compute instance just to be able to to get the result.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Great. Any other answer from the audience? Okay. Okay, Jack. Well, thank you very much for your time. And
of course.
Super
Thank you,
interesting
everyone.
project. Congratulations on your hard work on it.
Yeah, thanks. Looking forward to what happens next. Thanks for letting me talk about it.
For sure. Okay, to the audience, thank you for attending, and yeah, see you in the next one. Okay, thank you very much. Ciao.
Goodbye.